right, good morning. Today we're going to deconstruct the rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses. I was watching the congressional hearing on the rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses a while back. You put the first slide up. And, going to the second slide, yeah. And basically, as I was watching this hearing, I was asking myself, as an African American or Black man in this particular time in history, why should I be concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism when Jewish individuals like Edward Blum, Alan Bakke, and plagiaristic hypocrite Bill Ackerman have been leading the charge against affirmative action and diversity programs? Okay, and I started thinking about this, that wow, and all this is going on at this particular time. And you think about it in terms of what the real issue is. I mean, I'm saying now, why are these individuals attacking Black people and trying to keep Black people down to support the folks who put their people in ovens? But what it really came up was, as I was doing research on this, I was learning that there's a big difference between Judaism and Zionism. Okay, Judaism is a religion that's over 3,000 years. Zionism is an ideology that's less than 200 years old. Okay, and so that's mainly what we're talking about there. And then we're talking about those same policies that Trump is putting in place is actually making anti-Semitism on campuses worse. You can put the second slide on. Leave perfect there. Yeah, and you think it's actually making situations worse. And I keep going back there. Why hate on Black people? Why do these particular individuals leave Bakke and these other Blum or hating on Black people, doing everything they can to keep my children out of school? And at the same time, now the Nazis are coming after them. They are now want other people's support. Okay. And also you think about even the Anti-Defamation League. When was the last time the Anti-Defamation League went after a white person for anti-Semitism? Okay. Usually go after Kanye West, Whoopi Goldberg, all these other African Americans, but they never go after whites. Elon Musk get a Nazi salute. Oh, well, it's no big deal. Okay. Marjorie Taylor Greene talked about Jewish space leaders. Nobody bats an eye. When Whoopi Goldberg tells the truth, and she wasn't trying to be mean. She just said she saw Jews as white people. And next thing ADL came down on saying, you're evil, we're going to lose your job, and those type of things. And so it tells me something about where they're really coming from. And that brings up discussion between Zionism versus Judaism. Okay. And Zionism, like I said before, is an ideology that's relatively young. Judaism is a religion that's been around 3,000 years. Okay. And the thing is, these policies that Trump's putting in place, you want to put the next slide, these policies that Trump's putting in place are actually making things worse. Because I always ask myself, well, Black people didn't do anything to Jews. Okay. On the other hand, Europeans or the people that they're supporting are basically trying to keep me as a second-class citizen. But we never put them in concentration camps. We never put Jews in ovens. Black people never did those things. Yet these individuals are supporting the white supremacists. So when we started getting deeper, it comes back to Zionists versus Judaism. And thinking about the policies, the next slide, the policies that Trump's putting in place, like I said, is reality making things worse. Let's first of all look at it from the perspective of a student. Okay, I remember the teacher's pet. Maybe if some of you people were in school, you had a class, maybe one where the teacher was mean to everybody except one student and nice to them. Okay, so you had the teacher's pet phenomenon that's going on the college campus. In other words, we're going to push Black people and keep Black people off of campus. We're going to international students hesitate to come here, but we're going to coddle these particular people and protect these people and make these people safe. And so generally what happens by the middle of the semester, everybody's going to hate that teacher's pet. So that's one aspect. But also these policies are getting so bad that even professors are starting to hate on Jewish students because they associate this war on anti-Semitism as an excuse to take away their academic freedom and also an excuse to take away freedom of speech. Okay, and they're not gonna. Nobody's gonna really ever just get rid of anti-Semitism. You can't end anti-Semitism, especially using policies like Trump's using, just making things worse. Okay, I mean, let's think about it in real life. Anybody who knows anything about history is white Christians have hated Jews for over 1,000 years. I mean, Charlemagne killed tens of thousands of Jews right along with the Muslims and black people during his time period. Okay, during the Middle Ages, they blamed everything on Jews. If it was a storm, they blamed on Jews. A plague, they blamed on Jews. If it was a flood, natural disaster, they blamed on Jews. Kind of similar to what they're doing with DEI now. Okay, Trump fired the head of the aircraft controllers, and over the next 3 months, a whole bunch of plane crashes. Oh, it's DEI. Okay, but the reality, the only way that this anti-Semitism is going to reduce, you can only reduce it or make it worse. You can't go make it go away. Like I said before, white Christians have hated Jews for over 1,000 years. So you're not going to change that in the next 3, 4, even next 100 years. What's going to first have to happen is American Jews are going to have to come out and disassociate themselves from the Zionists. Can you replace 1 and 2 back to back?
The whole idea of Zionism was we're not Jewish. We're Hebrew, we're Israelis. Jews are something else. Most Jews never went to Israel. You can't make Israel representative of Jews, and you can't hold Jews accountable for what Israel does. So I really think we're playing into what Israel calls the new anti-Semitism that was invented by the Israeli government that says any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism. I think we have to negate that, and therefore I just wanted to say here that I was a little uncomfortable with the idea that somehow criticism of Israel has anything to do really with anti-Semitism.
There's literally nothing that Israel won't do in the name of vengeance and in the name of continuing Zionism. For some people, the takeaway is as long as they're not literally putting people in ovens, as long as they're not doing exactly what the Nazis did, that somehow that's okay. It's actually not okay. Never again doesn't mean never again in the exact same way that the Nazis did it. If that's your takeaway from the Holocaust, you really need to look at yourself and do some soul searching. I'm Jewish. I lost members of my family during the Holocaust. And the truth is, Israel does not represent me. Israel does not make me safer. In fact, it puts me and all Jews in greater danger. Because as Israel commits these crimes against humanity and live streams them, and in some cases gleefully live streams them, we've seen soldiers doing this, Israel doing that and saying it's in the name of Jews, that will create anti-Semitism. The idea that Israel represents all Jews is in itself an anti-Semitic idea. The dual loyalty trope says that all Jews are a monolith and we're all loyal to Israel and we can't be trusted to be loyal to other governments, regardless of where we live. That is really what Israel is leaning into. And you have anti-Semites and then the government of Israel, AIPAC and the ADL, all making the same argument, which I think really shows you the dangers and the inherent anti-Semitism of Zionism.
Thank you. And we need more individuals to come out and speak on this issue. You're going to show the next video. This next video is going to deal with the history of Zionism.
Now, if you've been online in the last few weeks and you've made any kind of comment critical of Israel and its actions in Gaza, or, even the most innocent comment supporting the Palestinians and the Palestinian cause, there's a near to 100% chance you've been called an anti-Semite. Now, there's a reason for that. It's deliberate. Because Israel and its allies want you and want us all to think that if you criticize Zionism, the ideology, if you criticize Israel, it means you're criticizing all Jews, which makes you an anti-Semite and probably Hitler's second cousin, once removed. This could not be further from the truth, of course. Simply put, and this is important because we tend to use the word Jew and Zionist interchangeably around here. Judaism is an ancient religion, thousands of years old, while political Zionism is an ideology and not even 200 years old. Not all Jews are Zionists, and interestingly, not all Zionists are Jews. Now, the history of modern Zionism starts with a Jewish Austro-Hungarian journalist called Theodor Herzl, who in 1897 wrote a pamphlet titled Der Judenstaat, which means the Jewish state, and that led to the foundation of the World Zionist Organization. Now, Herzl's an interesting character. He didn't speak Hebrew. He barely knew anything about Jewish culture or religion. But that's okay, because it wasn't religion that inspired him as much as it was nationalism. And to understand that, we must understand the times he lived in. This is the time when nationalism is peaking in Europe, and the colonial projects are in full swing around the world. This is, of course, the same nationalism that will ultimately culminate in World War II. Now, with so many peoples in Europe and in his own country, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, seeking their own little ethno-states, Herzl decided that, hey, the Jews should do the same. Now, Palestine wasn't his first choice. He even considered Uganda as a possibility, along with a couple of other options, which again goes to show that he wasn't really motivated by religion as much as he was motivated by nationalism. Eventually, of course, they settled on Palestine. But there was another motivating factor: anti-Semitism in Europe. Now, that's a polite term to cover a wide variety of mass murder, vilification, targeting, and ostracization of the Jewish community in Europe. That this started literally from day one, when the Jews were accused of being Christ killers. During the Crusades, the Crusaders targeted the Jews as much as the Muslims. Everything from economic downturn, bad weather, to the Black Plague was blamed on Jews, and tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands, were massacred over the years. This dark history, of course, inevitably culminated in the Holocaust. Now, here's the thing with Herzl. His idea was that, hey, the best way to stop anti-Semitism and persecution in Europe of Jews was if all the Jews simply leave Europe. Now, Herzl and his allies realized that in this project, they wouldn't just get support from the Jewish community, but also from the vast majority of Europeans who hated the Jews and wanted them gone. So it's one hell of an unholy alliance. In his pamphlet, he himself wrote that, and I quote, "Christians who want to get rid of Jews would also contribute to the immigration fund for European Jews." So ironically, we find that right at the outset, Zionists and anti-Semites became allies, and that, by the way, continues to this day.
Thank you. Think about that. Okay, you can put the next slide up. In terms of Zionists, okay, versus Judaism. Okay, this next video is basically some rabbis. Next two videos going to be rabbis talking about Zionism. If you know anything about Jewish cultures, rabbis are highly respected in the Jewish community. Okay, they're very similar to ministers in Christian communities, except rabbis are also scholars. Okay, and they're basically saying that Zionism is a fringe religion or a fringe of Judaism.
Entire Zionist history, culture, Jewish identity is all contrived. It's synthetic, it's artificial. People sat down, and they still do today. There are think tanks, JPPI and various others like that. And they think, how could we further advance Zionism? How could we change the story? How could we better the story? How could we progress? How could we get more followers? And one of the things they did was they wanted to make Jews appear as if they are organically connected to the Holy Land, but not from a religious perspective, not from a spiritual perspective, not from a God-centric perspective, rather from a national perspective. Zionism itself was created as a substitute for Judaism, a replacement for Judaism, and a way to negate Judaism.
Yeah, so that takes us to our first question. What is a Jew?
Zionists are unable to answer because they negated the real definition. When I say the real definition, I mean the only intellectually consistent one. Being a Jew, in the most accurate way to describe it, is a job description given by God. God said, you are deputized into this religion. You are obligated to fulfill these commandments, whether you do them or not. The obligation, the job description, defines you as a Jew. Now, the Zionists didn't want this definition of Jew. The Zionist plan was to change, to end anti-Semitism by changing Semitism as far as Jews are concerned, by eliminating that. The problem with the original plan, assimilation, is that it didn't work. In the late 1800s, there were pogroms, primarily in Russia, which showed the Zionists, or the assimilated Jews actually, that assimilated Jews are still Jews and they're still hated. But now that's where the identity crisis comes in. The subtitle of my book is Zionism's Journey from Identity Crisis to Identity Theft. The Zionists didn't understand this. They were thinking, why do people hate us if we're just like the Gentiles? We're just regular Russians. Why do they look at us as Jews? That's a very good question. I once asked an anti-Semite, a real famous, I don't want to say his name, real famous anti-Semite, how do you decide who's a Jew? He says, well, whoever identifies as a Jew is Jewish. The Zionists had said to themselves, hey, we don't want to be Jews, but the Gentiles won't let us be Gentiles. So what are we? That was the identity crisis. And many scholars have used that phrase in various contexts. It was an identity crisis. So they came up with what I call identity theft. We're going to change the definition of Jew. Nationalism was just starting in those days. This was the 1800s. It was the Balkan people and others. Nation states started being formed in those days. And they said, hey, nationalism worked for so many people, let it work for the Jews as well. So we're going to change the definition of Jew to a nationality. Until the Zionists, nobody looked at the Jews as a nationality. The plan was to change the definition of a Jew to a nationality. And the idea was that once the Jews change their definition, the way they look at themselves, the world will change the way they look at the Jews as well.
As we see this last Saturday, it was shocking to the world, but the world doesn't seem to take in regard the 75 years that every day almost you have Palestinian death and suffering. But we as Jews do take this into consideration. It's not how I personally look at this. It's how, as a Jew who's observant, who's following the rules of the Judaism, of the Torah, Judaism is subservience to God. That's what it's all about. It's a religion of 3,000 years, while Zionism is a mere 150 years. It's a transformation to nationalism, to have a piece of land. It's a political movement. It's a materialistic movement. It was started by Jews who are non-religious, and they're simply incorporating, using the name Israel, using the Star of David, and claiming that it's a God, it's given to them by God. And we who are following the Torah, who are true to the Torah, stand up adamantly refuting what they're saying. The Torah clearly states that we shall not kill, we shall not steal, and the whole concept is strange, is totally antithetical to our teachings, contradictory. The Jewish community had been living together with the Muslim community and the Christian community, and since this movement started, and since they gained hold in the land and eventually got rule over the land, there's been endless bloodshed. There's hate that has grown thousandfold. It's a wedge driven between the Jews and the Muslims, and it's brought death and suffering to the Palestinian people in the majority, but to the Jewish populace also. As we see this last Saturday, it was shocking to the world, but the world doesn't seem to take in regard the 75 years that every day almost you have Palestinian death and suffering. But we as Jews do take this into consideration. We say this is clearly a rebellion against God, and it hurts us more than usual because it's being done in our name.
It's what these rabbis are saying is what we mentioned before, is that Zionists is just a fringe. They're fringe versions, and they're not real Jews to a certain extent. Okay, let's go back to Zionism versus Judaism. They're two totally different issues, but the way the media is confusing it to where we don't really know which is which. And people, that's what that was one of the pieces that's missing from that conference or that congressional hearing, is that everybody try to say Zionism and Judaism are the same. So if you hate what they're doing in Israel, then you're anti-Semite and you're going to go to hell. Okay, you want to throw the next video? And also, what you don't know is that even into today in Israel, DNA testing is illegal. It's illegal to do DNA testing is in Israel. And after listening to these rabbis, it makes sense why. But here's this next video.
You're not allowed to have a DNA test in Israel. There are Chinese Jews. I've met them. There are Vietnamese Jews. I've met them. They're not native to the land of Palestine. There are African Jews. They're not native to the land of Palestine either. There are Ashkenazi Jews who are entirely European in their DNA. That's why you're not allowed to have a DNA test in Israel, because it will reveal that virtually none of them are Semitic, virtually none of them have any ancestral connection to the land. I was viciously assaulted by a manager in the BBC who had recently converted to Judaism. It's fine. I love all religions. But you can't say I've now converted to Judaism and therefore I have a right to go to the land of Palestine and live in the house of someone whose ancestors have been living in it for thousands of years again.
Now, this next video is basically a response to what I hear people talk and refer to the last attack on Gaza.
Of course, war is horrible, so why did the Palestinians initiate this war on October 7th?
Well, they didn't. They didn't. This war has been going on for 75 years. Israel initiated it in 1948 by ethnically cleansing 750,000 people. This is what you need to understand. The people in Gaza, over 80% of them are refugees from a place called Majdal Asqalan in what is now southern Israel, in a city called Ashkelon. And they were dragged from their homes and driven from their homes, placed in prison camps, barbed wire prison camps, and then dumped in trucks in 1950 into the Gaza Strip where they would be permanently warehoused. And then Israel proceeded to move Jewish refugees and Russians into Ashkelon to prevent them from ever coming back. So this didn't come out of a vacuum. You're not going to be able to hold people under siege, cut them off from the world, and then expect them to just play along.
All right, that's kind of where we are. So, in retrospect, we first started talking about the whole issue is mainly about the rise of anti-Semitism on campus, and the main issue has to be is information. I mean, education. People need to be educated. What's really going on with it? People need to be educated that all Jews are not Zionists. Okay, people need to be educated who these Zionists really are. Okay, back to plagiaristic Bill Ackerman, Alan Bakke, and Edward Blum. These are individuals who are doing everything to keep African Americans out of colleges and all these. They're more Zionists than they are Jewish. Okay, and that's one of the issues to kind of look at. And so, in review, you're not going to end anti-Semitism. There's no way in the world. I mean, like I said, white Christians have hated Jews for over 1,000 years. It's not going to change in the next 2 or 3. However, it could be reduced by more American Jews coming out and disowning these Zionists. How much time do they have? Because you're going to have to go to my ear one. Go to my ear video. Yeah. You show that one.
Of course, wars.
Oh, go to my ear. She's one of the first prime ministers of Israel.
When Ethiopian people were immigrated to Israel, Ethiopian Jews, women then report 2013, that is not like 50 years ago. They reported that they were given against their consent and without their knowledge contraceptive shots so they wouldn't reproduce because they are the wrong color. Israel is a racist apartheid country that is projecting this shiny example of secularism and democracy for the people so people can accept whatever they do because they look at Palestinians as lesser people. This is the whole point. And I would like to quote Winston Churchill. He had a quote that say, I don't believe that we have made a great wrong to the Red Indians of America or the black people of Australia because they were replaced by a higher race, a stronger race, a more world-wisely race. This is why Queen Rainier is criticizing the West. This is why we here said, like, where are your values? Because this is the crux of the problem. It's not Hamas. It's not Palestine. It is people looking at us as lesser human beings.
Okay, that wouldn't go to my ear, but go to my ear. She basically talked about how She had a Palestinian passport. In other words, she and Palestinians lived peacefully together, okay, until this whole Zionism kicked in. And also throughout the Crusades, when Charlemagne was killing Jews and Black people and Muslims, Muslims offered protection for Jews during that time period. Okay, so in other words, Muslims and Jews actually got along really well throughout history. Okay, and you talk about anti-Semitism, it even goes back into Shakespeare. If you ever read the book Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, okay, so it's been here a long time. It's not going to end. All we can do is reduce it, and that we do that through education. So instead of so woke is versus sleep. They want you to be asleep, don't want you to know history. And if you knew any, and those Ackerman and those individuals, Baki and Blum, knew anything about history, if you go back before the Holocaust, Jews were the most assimilated group of people in Germany during that time. They were bankers and teachers and lawyers. And as soon as Hitler came into power, what happened? And this could happen again tomorrow in this country. How much was that? Okay. And so I want to thank you for your time. And hopefully you'll pass this information to other people and let you know that this is Rainier Avenue Radio. And I will see you on September 9th.